Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's first digital webinar, focusing on the latest offerings of Copilot Studio and building custom Copilots your way. My name is Chris Buerta, Commercial Manager for the Digital Workplace, and introducing your host this morning, Gary Finberg, our Technical Manager in the Digital Workplace unit. Just before we start, a little bit of housekeeping. Today's session will be recorded and the recording will be made available for you to access afterwards. Please feel free to share the links. It will be made available on our YouTube channel for anybody that might have missed today's session. Due to the size of the audience, everybody will be muted by default, and we will ask that you post any questions in the Q&A window. You will find access to the Q&A window by clicking the Q&A icon in the top right-hand side of your Teams window. Questions asked will be discussed towards the end of the session. It's unlikely that we'll be able to answer all the questions if we do run out of time, but our contact details will be made available so that you guys can reach out to us directly. Please feel free to use the emojis to express your emotion. And with that, let's get going. Stephanie, please make available for us our poll for this morning. Super. We're doing a quick little poll here before we start. Could your business benefit from Copilots, but you don't have time to build them? Do you know what they are, or have you dabbled in them? Please go ahead and just respond to that poll for us. Oh, wow. Everybody sees value in switching on Copilot in their organization. That's excellent. There's a couple of guys already using it. That's also fantastic. With overwhelming 80+% saying yes, you are in the right session. Guys, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Gary that is going to showcase to you guys the power of Copilot Studio, as well as 4 targeted demos that we've prepared for the session. Thank you and have fun. Gary, over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar. I'll be your Copilot for this introduction to Microsoft Copilot Studio, the latest evolution of what used to be Power Virtual Agents. So we've moved way beyond bots to Copilots. Copilot Studio gives you the power to create your own custom Copilots, ranging from simple guided questions and answers, all the way to rich interactive conversational experiences that leverage generative AI, custom integrations to line of business systems, and more. This is exciting new technology. So while this will mainly be a demo-driven session, I would, however, like to begin with a brief overview for the benefit of those audience that might not have had any exposure to Copilot Studio. So let's get started. Copilot Studio is basically an end-to-end conversational AI platform that enables you to create and customize Copilots using natural language or a graphical interface. It is accessed via web-based IDE in the Power Platform. And with it, you can easily design, test, publish Copilots that suit your specific needs for internal or external scenarios across your industry, department, or role. I just want to draw your attention to the Copilot Studio landing page on the screen. Pardon me. And for those who've been doing some work or followed the evolution from Power Virtual Agents to where we are now, you'll note that the UI, it's got a brand new UI recently, like say in the last week. You can see things are laid out. It looks a lot more consistent with the Power Apps and Power Platform landing page. You can see we've got Copilots prompt front and center, got the same options with some suggestions. Click on this to create a help desk, expense tracking, or HR. Otherwise, put in your own prompt. We've got some of our recent Copilots we've created. Microsoft have created a bunch of templates that are available as kind of starting points for bots. And then we've got some nav options here. Create a new one, look at your existing Copilots, and view the library. So first off, I want to briefly touch on responsible and secure AI. And I'm specifically leading with this as it turns out to be a concern for many of our customers. It's a big debate around it, a lot of concern being expressed. So Microsoft 365 Copilot is integrated into Microsoft 365, which adheres to all existing privacy and compliance obligations and provides value by connecting large language models, or LLMs, to your organizational data. So it's important to note that prompts, responses, and data accessed through the Microsoft Graph are not used to train foundational LLMs. That's important. So when you enter prompts using Copilot Studio, the information contained within your prompts, the data they retrieve, and the generated responses remain within the Microsoft 365 service boundary. And this is fully in keeping with Microsoft's current privacy, security, and compliance commitments. Note that Copilot also uses Azure OpenAI services for processing, not OpenAI's publicly available services. Copilot is compliant with existing privacy, security, and compliant commitments to Microsoft 365 commercial customers, including GDPR and EU data boundary. And lastly, some other key considerations in terms of how Copilot processes your data. Logical isolation of customer content within each tenant, with Azure AD authorization and role-based access control. Microsoft also uses physical security screening and a multi-layered encryption strategy to protect customer content, and they also encrypt customer content at rest and in transit. Also, given that data is the fuel that powers AI technology, it's crucial that you can fully trust what your technology partners are doing with your data. Microsoft's AI principles are built directly into Copilot. So first and foremost, your data is your data. That means it's yours to own and control. Your data to choose how you want to leverage and monetize. Your data is not used to train or enrich the foundational AI models used by others without your permission. So you don't ever have to worry about anyone other than your organization benefiting from AI that is trained on your data. And your data and AI models are fully protected by arguably the most comprehensive enterprise compliance and security controls in the industry. So just wanted to briefly touch on that to make you guys aware of it. And if you're interested in more detail or a deeper discussion around responsible AI and AI principles, please contact us after the webinar and we can share info on our Copilot readiness assessment. Okay, so just a couple of quite powerful stats and forecasts. So Gartner forecasts that by 2026, 30% of work activities involving the use of technology will be conversationally enabled. Conversational artificial intelligence deployments within contact centers will reduce agent labor costs by $80 billion. And up to 80% of organizations' digital experiences will be delivered to consumers via virtual people. Pretty staggering predictions. Let's look at some of the features of Copilot before we get to our demos. So fundamentally, Copilot provides a rich set of tools and capabilities that enable users to create and manage powerful AI-enhanced conversational experiences, all under a single pane of glass. So for example, you can start by building manual topics where you control the flow of turn-by-turn dialogue. And this is your typical chat experience. You can then level up and you can use prompts to create full-blown conversational experiences simply by typing a prompt, and Copilot Studio will leverage AI to build out all the steps by gathering data from the large language model. And I'll demo this capability a little later on. You can add internal or external content data sources. So that might be public-facing websites, SharePoint sites, or even add documents as static data sources. And you can also inject images and video into the conversational flow. So this is no longer, the old style text experience. This is completely interactive. It's dynamic. It's responding to you. It's making its own decisions. It's following various logic tracks. It understands the context of what's happening. And you can also enrich the experience with digital assets like files and images and video. You can build and call actions and create plugins using the 1100 plus pre-built Power Platform connectors. So that's a massive win. For anybody using the Power Platform, you're aware of the vast and growing ecosystem of connectors. And effectively, these are pre-built APIs into industry line of business systems, and it's massive. So they're 1100 plus, and these are growing all the time. And you also can create your own custom connectors from within Copilot, and we'll take a look at that to connect to your own data sources. You can also leverage Power Automate to trigger workflows for more control over responses. So from within your conversational experience, you're able to, remember, this is built on top of Power Platform. So you've got access to all of the Power Platform kind of assets. You've got access to connections. You've got access to Power Automate. So you can make a call from a step in a workflow to make a call out to connect with SAP, for example, and bring back some SAP ticket data. So we'll have a look at a demo that shows that. And you can also seamlessly bring AI builder models into the experience. So in Power Automate, you have a whole range of rich and super powerful AI builder models. So this design methodology, I guess, or this design approach in Copilot allows you to bring in these actions. So you almost have like a store of available actions. And then you're able to daisy chain these almost like kind of Lego blocks, to build out functionality. And they all understand each other's context. So it drives an incredibly interactive and rich experience. And the other key point is that these connectors allow for seamless integration and data flow across a wide array of external systems, databases and cloud services, including things like Azure SQL database, Azure Logic apps, on-prem or cloud-based SQL Server databases, and more. So whether it's SAP, ServiceNow, Workday, Zendesk, a whole lot and more, you can connect it seamlessly in Copilot Studio. You can also create something called skills, and these are like a series of actions so that you can extend your Copilot's conversational capability by automating a series of actions within a topic. So for example, you can build out a skill that enables Copilot to book an appointment, which obviously involves a bunch of interactive steps, send a confirmation email, manage tasks, etc. And the beauty of all of these things, any asset or element that you build is now available to, it might be yourself, your team, or the organization, depending on how you choose to lock it down and the type of use. But you're constantly growing these sets of reusable components or functional Lego blocks. It's also powerful is just with a few clicks. So you build your Copilot once, and with a few clicks, you can easily deploy that custom Copilot to a myriad of multiple channels, such as you could deploy it to your public-facing website, you could deploy it to Teams, to Facebook, Trello, Slack. It's increasing the range of channels, and it's again that great experience of design once, and deploy it to multiple channels with a couple of clicks. Sorry, let me just go back one slide. Last point I wanted to make here is that Copilot also has a comprehensive set of management, security, monitoring, analytics, and telemetry features. So whilst you've all got all this great design experience and all these capabilities from a build perspective, from a management perspective, Copilot's also got your back. There's rich management capabilities, super rich analytics and telemetry reporting on all the activities. So really powerful from that perspective. It's got a great security implementation, so it makes it very easy to configure the security behind a particular bot or Copilot for the target location. So if you're targeting SharePoint to access SharePoint in a file share, that has to go via the Graph API. So there's the capability to do some app registration in Azure, give SharePoint access via the search to files and folders, etc. And then you've got that really nice integration, which we'll have a look at in a moment. Okay, so the last thing to cover there is that, again, this is built on Power Platform technologies, and it also, besides that power that we've just discussed, it also integrates various conversational stacks from across the entire Microsoft broader ecosystem. So from Open Azure AI Studio, Azure Cognitive Services, Azure Bot Services, etc. So you can see the extensibility is phenomenal. Last thing I want to talk about briefly before we go to demos is some new capabilities that have just sort of, pretty much made it into GA or public preview, and one in limited preview. But these are new generative AI capabilities in Copilot Studio. So they give you new capabilities to answer in certain scenarios, to act on certain things, and to build in a certain ways. So generative answers sort of dynamically generate multi-turn answers based off all your organization's content in real time, and we'll have a look at that. From an actions perspective, this is incredibly powerful. So, and this is just what I've been speaking to with the generative actions. You're actually able to generate dialogue and take action through a process by dynamically chaining these existing building blocks and plugins. So remember I said, if you create a connection to SAP, to ServiceNow, you bring in your MSN weather service, you've got service to like Yelp for reviews, to like SAOS booking service, whatever it might be. These all become blocks of capability that you can literally, they're like plugins, that's what they're called, to plug into your process. And they're all contextually aware. So an example might be, say I'm booking a holiday, and the bot, because the weather is running, the bot can identify my location. So when I make a request about, say I'm looking to take a holiday, it can recommend climate-based things, or it can see where I'm going and recommend what to pack based on the weather that's going to be in that place. So there's some phenomenal stuff, and this dynamic chaining is incredibly powerful in terms of rapid build. On the other build component, the generative building, super powerful. I'll illustrate this also. So at its simplest, this is really Copilot in full swing, where you could take, this won't take me more than 3 minutes to build for you, is to take, create a brand new Copilot that does nothing yet, drop in a prompt that I, in fairness, I have planned before, but drop that prompt in, give it a name, give it a URL, and publish it, and we'll have a fully interactive experience. And you'll also see that once you have the experience built out for you, and when I say the experience, it actually builds out all the steps, all the options, and it actually goes out to the large language model to bring in options that you might not have thought of. You're then able to still talk further and say, add the step to do this, connect me to that. It's really powerful stuff. Okay, in terms of this slide, I'm not going to go through it, but it's an incredibly useful slide from an ideation perspective. And what I'm going to do is leave it in the deck, and Stephanie will let you know where you can download the deck after the session. And I encourage you to take a look through. Just looking at one of those blocks, it's really looking at government use cases, and there are three there. One around information and policies, find a COVID testing center, something around public programs, getting child care assistance, or service tickets like report road hazards. And then underneath each one, you can see the plugin. So that's using some plugins. It's using on-prem SQL. It's using, this would be the plugin, PDF. There's some documentation there, on-prem SQL. And so you can see you've got all of these different combinations, and you can see the range of technologies that you might recognize that are all being brought together to provide this powerful, interactive, and dynamic conversational experience. So I won't belabor this, but take a look at it when you do get the slide deck. Okay, that was just a little preamble. I did want to share that intro stuff with you. Now let's go to demos. So what I've done is I've prepared 4 demos. We are pretty much stretched for time, or squeezed for time. So I'll go through them pretty quickly. And the idea was for each of them to illustrate like a different use case that's of interest to our clients. So the first one is SharePoint intranet search, and the goal there is to connect this Copilot via this app registration in Azure and that configuration, and to search the SharePoint tenant via the Graph API. We'll start with that one. The pizza pilot is a bit of a novelty, but it brilliantly illustrates this generative build capability where we build, the bot is built entirely from the prompt. Then there's a lightweight ServiceNow integration just to illustrate that capability. And then a demo around, a little bit more of a richer demo around SAP integration. So just give me a sec, I want to get over to that screen. Okay, so here I am in the Copilot Studio. You can see Copilot Studio up here. This is the screen I was showing. Is a little bit more on the screen. You can see more of these templates. There are a whole bunch of them coming soon. Some of them are in preview. And then, so we go back, got all our resources at the bottom. I can create a new bot. I can view my Copilots. I can go to the library of connections. Or I can connect out to other modules in the Power Platform space. You can see this is fully integrated. And then I've got some other information here about cognitive services and some AI integration. So what I'm going to do is move over to another tab. And here we are inside the IDE. So we're inside this design experience. And this bot was really simple to set up. Some colleagues and I were discussing, we're saying, yeah, it'd be really useful to get files from SharePoint. And ultimately, you could publish this out into your Teams environment. So you think how you're closing that loop on application switching. So I'm working in Teams. I need to go to SharePoint to find a document. I lose my context in Teams, probably end up wandering or looking at things in SharePoint and come back an hour later. So that can just close this loop. You can search for this stuff directly from there. So just need to, okay, so let's say, let's ask a couple of questions. So I need a migration checklist. So that might be a typical document we've got stored in SharePoint, and you can see it's sent off that message. And just to note, these take a little bit of time because it's in our dev tenant and it has to go via the Graph API. But just note, while that's looking, you can see here I've got this generative answer is being created in this component, and you can see the data sources here are, I've got 3 public websites, and these are, got some Microsoft Learn sites, and then I've got a SharePoint site configured, and you can have 4, and I've also got OneDrive configured. So just give it a sec. Also just, okay, so it's kind of brought back this information. So now what's interesting is if you look at this document, so if I hover and you look at the URL, in fact, I'll open it, you can see this is in our dev tenant. So this is clearly coming from SharePoint. And here is the document library that it's coming on. So you can clearly see this is getting this information from SharePoint. What's also interesting is that you can see this has also gone out to the large language model and given just some headline information. You can use a migration checklist to prepare. It's not just bringing back 3 raw documents. It's putting it into some type of context. And then it also has the citations along with it. So you can see this is coming from another context. These citations are coming from various internal and external contexts. Let's say I want to ask, do you have a SharePoint user guide? Give that a sec, probably 15, 30 seconds. Also, I want you to note, purposely, there's a typo in there because Copilot recognizes the context, so it can parse that out to understand that it's do you have a SharePoint user guide? Chris, I think we need some elevator music while we wait for Copilot to process. Okay. Okay, so there we go. So you can see again, using the, it's made some decision. It's using the large language model to give some information around this. And here we've got various options for SharePoint user guides. And this is here from our tenant. So I just briefly wanted to show that can obviously be fully enhanced. This is just a very simple indication of what that can do. I could publish this to Teams and let users have that experience directly from within the chat in Teams. Okay, so for the second demo, pardon me, what I want to do is I want to show off the prompt or the dynamic development of a bot based off a prompt. So what I'm going to do is go and create, so we get my cursor, I'm going to create a new Copilot. And you'll see there are a bunch of other options, but let's just stick with this one for now. So all I have to do is I'm going to give it a name. I'll call this Pizza Pilot. And I can give it an icon, so I could actually go and grab it. I'll just say allow a user to order pizza. And I could give it instructions, but what I'm going to do is just show you that that's all I need to do to get this started. I am leaving the language as English, and in fact, what I will do is I'll add some what's called knowledge, right? So these are these static data sources or dynamic that you can add up front. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to choose like a public website, and let me just go and grab when to grab the Debonair's URL. So I'll paste that in. And you noted on the previous screen there are lots of options for adding this, what they call knowledge up front. So I've just added that. You can see I've just given it three. I've given a name, a description, and a URL. So I'm going to go and create this. And that's basically setting up my Copilot. Now, what I'm going to do once the base Copilot is set up, all I'm going to do to build this out is create a new topic. And for people that have built Copilots before or bots in the old days, everything is driven by topics. The beauty of Copilot these days is that you can create topics from AI. So what I'm going to go into the topics tab. It's ready. Yes, I can do this. So I go into the topics tab, and you can see there's some default topics. There's like a goodbye, what to do when someone says goodbye. If you ask to start over, there's some basic. But what I'm going to do is say not from blank, but I'm going to create from a description. So let's say I call this order pizza, and here I drop my prompt. Now I've created a prompt that it says, let someone order pizza, welcome them to the delivery service, ask them if they would like today's special deal, which is whatever it is. Then choosing from common pizza types, allow them to choose from multiple common toppings, choose how many pizzas they want, how many they want to order, choose from common pizza sizes, crusts, whatever it might be. Ask them for the delivery address, ask if they want to choose a payment method, ask if they'd like to be added to the mailing list, and if they want to be rated. And finally, give me a summary of that order. So if you think about it, that's how you might be. If you're sitting around planning this, you might just jot down those ideas. So that's all we need. So we kick that off. And Copilot is now provisioning it. Now what it's doing is it's building out all the components of this topic. So it's looking at the large language model, and it's saying, okay, what are common pizza sizes? So if you see here, if I look down in this dev space, you can see it's actually extrapolated from my prompts. First of all, it's injected standard triggers. So this might just be what people typically say when they're ordering a pizza. So I don't even have to do that. There's a whole bunch of them already here for me. Then there's the welcome message. What would you like to order? And you can see it's already added some variables here, like for what the special deal is. And it's added my options and created variables to, already to save my decisions. You can see it's literally built all of this out for me. So what I'm going to do is I can now, here's the test panel. So I can come over and test. So I just say hi. And hi, how can I help you? And I can just say order pizza. I can pick any of those triggers. And it's now following the process. Would you like to order today's special deal, half price for XZ? I'll say yes. What type of pizza would you like? I'll choose pepperoni. Choose your toppings. I'll just choose mushrooms. How many pizzas would you like? Let's say 4. What size would you like? Let's make them large. I'll go for thin crust. And my delivery address is 22 Main Road. Well, Manny Road. And my payment method. So let's say I'm going to pay cash. And it asks if I'd like to be added to the mailing list. Sure. And please rate our service. You guys were great. And there you go. Thank you for your order. Here's a summary. Everything is there in key value pairs. And what I can also do with this is if I obviously want to spend a bit of time, this last card here, I could create an adaptive card where I style it up. I put debonair's, I put their logo on, style it up. I could integrate this with a checkout and actual payment mechanism, integrate with the delivery service. So I think you can see that, that couldn't have taken me more than 2 or 3 minutes. And we've already got the foundation of this full-blown thing. And you can even then choose later on to hand this off to a live desk if you choose to. Okay, so that's the build, the interactive build scenario. And now I'm going to go over to Teams. And what I've done is I've just created a simple integration between Teams and ServiceNow. And basically just want to illustrate 1 or 2 things here. So I can say, let me say, sorry, I want to log a ticket. So, hi, Gary. So it recognizes me. To log a ticket, please provide a short description of the issue. Can't access the Wi-Fi. And then so let me give a due date for this task. So 24th, 24. And now it's being created and it comes back. And here we did use an adaptive card with some JSON formatting. So it's an attractive experience. We could obviously style this up fully, but this is just to indicate you can have styling, a bit of layout that's a bit more aesthetic. And now it asked me, what do I want to do next? Okay, let me log another ticket. Need an E5 license. And again, I give it a date. Cool. Now maybe I want to check a ticket status. So I can do that, and it's going to ask me what's my incident number. And I can just go INC 001 006. And then it pulls this incident number back, and I can go round and round checking a login. And I could, at some point, I can just say thank you. And you can see it also interpreted the text. But I'm going to leave it there because this sort of can go on and on. So just want to, again, illustrate that. And then just to show you guys, let's see where this is. On this back end, on the ServiceNow dev instance, you can see these here. This is the latest tickets. I need an E5 license. So you can see it's dynamically writing. And obviously you could take this further. This is just a very simple, you could query the knowledge base. You could view reporting. You can build out a whole integrated capability. And in fact, there is now a module in the latest iteration called Service. So it's actually a pre-built Copilot from within Copilot to interact with ServiceNow. Okay, so I've got one more demo to show you. Let me just minimize this. Okay, this is a bit more complex. It's a bit of a SAP integration. So just give me one sec on the screen. Okay, so for this demo, I want to show some more of the generative AI and integration capabilities inside Copilot Studio. So we can use Copilot to answer business questions by bringing our business processes into the solution via connectors, plugins, and generative AI. Okay, so now we're here inside the Teams chat, and we want an intuitive conversational experience where we can simply talk to Copilot to answer our questions, to help us understand what's going on in our business. So let's say in my job, I work with supply chain and suppliers, and I want to know what's the supplier lead time for one of our common suppliers, in this case, Alpine Ski House. So let me advance the slide. Okay. So I ask Copilot, what are the lead times for the supplier Alpine Ski House? And Copilot generates an answer. So the answer is, I'm sorry, but I couldn't find any information about your active repair items. Can you please provide more details or context so I can better assist you? So this is obviously not the response that I was looking for. But the reality is that at this point, Copilot doesn't know how to get that information. It's not accessible via the Microsoft Graph, pardon me, and it's also not available on the web. So basically, Copilot doesn't know anything about my supply chain or the systems that I use to run it. But in our scenario, the good news is that we can easily extend Copilot to make this work. And you'll even note that in its answer, Copilot is even nudging us in the right direction. So if you look at the second line, it's telling us you can enable one of the relevant plugins from sources with the icon. Click below and I'll be able to assist you. So we can use this as an opportunity, as a starting point to show the extensibility inside of Copilot. So in this case, for example, I can use Copilot Studio to create a plugin to connect to my own line of business systems if one doesn't already exist. And if we look right there, just under that chat box at the blocks icon, we see that there's an option to open Copilot directly from inside the Teams chat experience to create our own extensions, our own logic, and our own data sources. So, I mean, this is super integrated. We literally, in that chat experience, we realized we're trying to interact, we're not getting what we like, and Copilot's actually telling us what to do next. So we're now going to sort of open this Copilot Studio experience. So if we open that and we click through to Copilot Studio, we can see that there are many options for creating plugins, data sources, connectors, plus a range of things. You can see down the left, entities, generative AI, GPTs. There's a mass of capabilities in there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start extending Copilot by building what's called a conversational plugin. These plugins allow us to register a trigger phrase, which will execute a series of steps or even multi-turn conversations based on what the user has entered. So the first thing we're going to do is to create a conversational plugin, and this will allow me to chain together multiple steps, like a data lookup or text summarization, to provide a reply, and I can then use this plugin in our Copilot. So I click on Add a Conversational Plugin directly inside of this experience. And note that I don't have to leave Copilot Studio and go to like Visual Studio or other dev tools or even another IDE. And clicking on that add takes me to the familiar visual designer. So most of you on the call that have worked in Power Platform will recognize this kind of design interface. So it's another benefit is that the tooling is all common, familiar, standard tooling. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called a trigger. And with a trigger, I provided details and prompts about when I want to execute this plugin. And so via this trigger, this is how Copilot in Teams is going to know when to execute the specific plugin. In this case, it's going to be when someone asks about supplier metrics and performance. Okay, but it doesn't stop there. We also want to take actions and do things in response to the question. So the first step will run in response to a question from an end user. And we do that by creating something called a generative answer. Generative answers allow me to query existing knowledge, resources, and content that I specifically curate and choose so that I can have it reply back inside of the Copilot. They allow me to register public websites, SharePoint sites, documents, and more. And I think you saw on that earlier screen, there are a whole bunch of rich data sources also available there. And these are then synthesized and replied back to the user to answer their question. And what's great is I can hard code exactly the data sources I want, if that's what I'm looking for. So to do that, for this use case, I add a step, go to advanced, and then select generative action. Now, if we look at this trigger that we've created, we can see that it's providing information about what the conversational plugin is going to do. So like, describe what it's providing details to employees asking questions about supply metrics and performance. And it's useful because this gets registered back to Copilot. So it'll only invoke this extension in Copilot Studio when a user asks the relevant question. So this is also around the chaining of these blocks that don't all necessarily need to fire in a sequence, but can fire based on conditional aspects and various triggers. And now also this conversational plugin is only going to be used whenever an employee is asking a question about supplier metrics and performance. And this actually could be any other topic you can imagine. You just need to describe it in natural language. And obviously it needs to be relevant to your use case. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and like select this generative answers option. And now, if I click through and use these generative answers, you notice we get this great experience where we can configure up to 4 public websites and up to 4 different SharePoint sites. And these are source locations where I want to pull information from that's going to contribute to answering the question. And this is really super easy. You basically just need to copy and paste the URLs in. To add to that, it doesn't only support web and SharePoint. You're also able to use Azure AI Studio and other Azure AI capabilities to extend the Copilot. So effectively, we can start out low code, but then go all the way to pro code because we can leverage pro code components and objects and plugins that have been created externally and bring them into the picture. So at this point, I could like simply configure to use a public supplier website. But I would rather use an internal SharePoint site where I already store documents about my suppliers. So I'm going to add, you can see I'm adding that URL there. Now, I've already got a SharePoint site where I have documents about supplier information. So I'll add that URL. And this is how I can guide exactly the reply I want from my plugin. And here you can see the document that I'm linking to. It's our supplier fact sheet, and it's 20+ pages of unstructured data, tables, and information about all the different suppliers that we use in the organization. So it's static. So we've now configured the link to the SharePoint site. And if we switch back over to Copilot Studio, we now select the input text from the question the user asked. So that was stored in a variable, and we now are selecting that input text. And what we want to do is we want to pass that into the data source. So I'm able to get all of this going really quickly and easy, you can see, with a couple of clicks. Okay, so that's the first part of this configuration. So once we've done that, we're going to save and publish. We're going to go back to Teams, and we're going to ask that question again. So now note that we kind of get a little bit more, because at least now Copilot can answer us with something coherent. You know, an average supplier, Alpine Ski House, delivers products within 10 days of order of placement. But I mean, it's great, but that answer is specifically from the document, you know, and it is great and it's good to get started. But because it's static, it's literally only showing data that was maybe from a week ago, possibly even a month ago. So it's not really that useful. What we really want to do, pardon me, what we really want to do is enhance this experience to be more interactive and relevant to us in real time. So we want to use data that's stored in my company's systems of record, because my back office knows exactly the expectations for the supplier. So let's go and do that. So we're now going to save off this topic and publish it to Copilot, which allows me, as we've said, to ask a basic question and get a basic answer. But now we want to be able to look up information from suppliers in real time. So to do that, we go back to Copilot Studio, and this time we're going to create a new conversational plugin again. So just like before, I'm going to give it the same. We've got to configure it to trigger when an employee asks about that topic of supplier metrics and performance. I'll use the same trigger as before because effectively we're asking for the same information. So I just copy and paste that in. But for this plugin, we're going to use different data sources. So now we want to use dynamic data sources and not static data sources. So I want this to be dynamic and give me real-time data directly from a live SAP system. And we can see here that I can choose an action to call out to SAP directly, and that will pull directly from our SAP backend, because the information I'm looking for isn't always in a website or on Azure or available in Microsoft or the large language model. And in this case, the information I'm looking for is specifically in SAP. So I'm going to call my SAP instance and a custom REST API that has already been defined to bind together this information and give an answer that's exactly right at the point in time that I need it. See, and you can see here on the list, this is a list of some of these actions and plugins that I mentioned, where there are 1,100 of them, but you're easily able to kind of filter down. So first, we go down to call an action, and then inside choose an action, we filter for SAP. And out of the SAP options, we choose read SAP table option, and then we resolve that connection. And note that this connection's already been set up behind the scenes with the relevant credentials, so therefore it's already available for me to use. If I was setting up a brand new SAP connection, I would need to do that, capture the credentials and make sure it resolves. So now that we've got access to read the SAP table, I'm able now to get back all the information I want for different actions I can execute against the instance. So in this case, I'm going to read from a SAP table, and I just need to configure a few other things like table name to get this sorted. Ultimately, this will allow me to easily pull the information I need, no matter where it's hosted. So even using the on-prem data gateway if needed to connect to on-premise, or standard connectors for Power Platform. Okay, so I also want to take the information from earlier and use it to make another call to another system. That is, I want to take the result from SAP and pass it to my custom REST endpoint. I can do that inside of Copilot by calling this action and creating a custom connector. I'll use this custom connector, order delivery rates that I've already registered and published in Azure. I can call it to look up real-time information about supply quality metrics. Now, this is chained in Copilot after that SAP call. So when I execute the step, in response to the message from the user in Copilot, I'm calling SAP and then making a call to the internal system. But that's only step one. I then want to take the result from SAP and pass it to my custom REST endpoint. And I can do that inside Copilot Studio by calling this action and creating a custom connector to register my own backend system. So for this demo, the order delivery rates API has already been created, configured, and hosted, and the endpoint is registered in Azure API Management. And now I want to sequence a bunch of individual API calls to fulfill this question from the user inside Copilot. This sequencing is important because I want to control exactly how I pass information between these two systems to generate my response. And I also don't want to respond back with just JSON or unformatted text. I actually want to synthesize the information from both SAP and my REST API to reply to the user. And to do that, I'm going to use a custom generative response. And this is pretty much at the end. So to do that, I pass the information from that supplier quality metrics, and I create a summary of that information to reply back to the user. Now, that custom instruction that create the summary of lead times is actually a prompt. So I'm dynamically providing a prompt that's going to provide, I'm giving the prompt to the generative AI model in addition to the information from the quality metrics API, which will generate the response. And these instructions guide how I want to format the information, plus the information I specifically want to highlight. And we get all of this back in a really simple workflow that's orchestrated across multiple systems to give our specific information that we want in real time. Okay, so now we've configured this generative response, and we go to our topic checker, confirm there are no issues, and we can save and publish to Copilot. And now once it's published, we can go back to the original Copilot in Teams. Now ask Teams the original question again: what are the lead times to supply Alpine ski house? And now if we look at the reply, we get a useful dynamic and real-time response. So it's telling me on average, Supply Alpine Ski House delivers products within 10 days of order placement. So we had that first from the static one, but now there's some intelligence on it and business logic. And it said over the past 6 months, they have maintained an on-time delivery rate of 86% for our orders. So that wraps up kind of this portion, but you can see that it's now bringing back, by this quick real-time kind of integration, it's bringing back a whole lot of extra value and bringing me some meaningful business responses. So just to wrap this up, we can see that this has become a progressively more real-time and meaningful experience as we extended Copilot to meet our requirements. So initially it could only answer, well, it couldn't answer our question at all. Then it could provide an answer based on a static data source like a PDF. And ultimately, it's now returning real-time, dynamic, useful responses. And also note that data is not coming from a public website. It's not coming from Microsoft 365 or even the foundational model. So yeah, we've built this integration using Copilot Studio. And what this hopefully has demonstrated is the powerful ability to use the Studio, to use Azure, to use existing APIs and data sources to enrich Microsoft Copilot in a seamless, integrated end-to-end experience. Thanks. So, guys, I guess we are close to the end. I'd love to take some questions, but give you the call whether you first might want me to quickly speak to licensing costs or if you want to go straight to questions.
I think questions, please.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so the first question is from Calvin. Is there a way to teach the co-pilots for your organization to recognize specific jargon and contextualize it appropriately?
Yes, absolutely. So you're able to train the bot or the co-pilot. So you, as we were saying, you say you've got your specific jargon or your a glossary or whatever it might be. You can feed that in and you upvote that. And that's what you'll get back. So what it can do is it can recognize a term in isolation. It can recognize the spelling, the irregular spelling of a term, and still understand that the term was meant to be like, instead of regular, you typed regular, it will understand that. And then you can provide contexts. So you can contribute to the learning and the training of a piece of data or your model.
Okay, then we've got one from Emil. So I understand that Copilot is in a user's own tenant, and when a query runs, it will use the Microsoft Graph inside your own tenant. However, when it uses the LLM to make the AI answer, it will send the question file or any other data to the LLM. Where is that LLM? Is the LLM in a shared Microsoft space? Which Microsoft area is it in? And how secure is my company data and questions in this space?
Sure. So remember when I talked to the responsible and secure AI, and we can revisit that, or Emil, we can get on a call to discuss in more detail. But effectively, remember, we're not using the open AI services. We're using Azure AI services. So nothing in your prompts, your questions, data that you're sharing gets appended or added or included in the external foundational models. As I was saying earlier on, that is all fully managed.
Okay, then Marvin, is Copilot subscriptional and licensed, and how do you go about using it?
Sure. So there are various like models for, and you actually, it happens to be on the screen, but fundamentally you need a tenant license, and that's a tenant license for your tenant. And that is $200 per month at the moment. And it comes with 25,000 what are called messages per month. So you get your 25,000 messages for your $200. And that the following month, that's re-up to another 25,000. You also need a per user license for Copilot creation for users in the tenant that are adding Copilots and managing Copilots. Important to note that anyone consuming a Copilot you've built there are no license implications. They can use them freely. Just to explain what messages are. So these Copilot messages are the common currency in the Copilot space. So a build message is a request or message that's sent to Copilot that triggers an action or a response. So it's quite literal. It's like one action, one response, one message, either way, you know. And you can see here licenses are based on capacity, and you can also get blocks. So you can up your block if you run out in a month. You can up to 200. We give you another 25,000. Some use cases to give examples are like if a user asks Copilot when a store is open. So like simple Copilot, hi Steph, when is your store open? And Copilot responds with a pretty static answer. That's one build message. So one credit or message off your 25,000. If Copilot proactively greets the user, so Copilot knows that when it will greet me, that's a single build message. But however, whenever you leverage generative AI, that's a double message. So user asks Copilot for store hours for the upcoming holiday. Copilot responds with a generative answer, and that is so that your request is one and Copilot's generative answer, because effectively a response. And then
Okay,
go ahead.
Gary, we have 1 minute left, so
Okay,
I'll ask the last question, and then the other questions we'll just include the answers in the follow-up email.
Sure.
So the next one is why the restriction on only 4 websites and internal sites on the data source?
Sure, that's a good point. We have reached out to Microsoft to understand why there is that limitation, and I guess the way you could answer that is a bot is typically for a specific use case, and 4 public websites would probably contain a ton of information. 4 SharePoint sites can have almost endless information, so it does cater for a lot. But that is a good point, that there happens to be that limit at the moment. And I would imagine that as the demand grows, Microsoft will increase that limit.
Okay, we're out of time, so yeah.
Cool, guys. Well, yeah, thanks, everyone. I know there was a lot and needed to go quite fast to get a reasonable amount of info, but really, really appreciate everybody making the time. I certainly hope you got some value out of it, and feel free to reach out to us via Stephanie, myself, or Chris, or the email that's on the last slide in the deck. And also to note, if you want to engage directly around specific requirements or information, or for strategic guidance, you're welcome. And we also have a Copilot readiness assessment that we can assist you with, where we speak to a lot of these issues about licensing, capacity, security, that type of thing.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Gary. Well done. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I hope it's been an insightful session. Please reach out, and we'll take it further with you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.